Hello! So it's been exactly a year since I stopped breastfeeding, so I thought I would make a video to talk a little bit about my experience, because that's not something I've done on this channel yet, and that's mainly because I found it too hard to talk about. I had a really difficult time, but hopefully this video will help somebody else in a similar situation. So yeah. My breastfeeding story actually begins way back when I was 17, and I found a lump in my boob, and I had surgery, had it removed, and I remember the surgeon saying there's a small possibility that you might not be able to breastfeed. And obviously, as a 17-year-old girl, I thought nothing of it, just carried on with my life. But when I was 22, it came back, and it was much more aggressive this time, and we actually discovered that it was a tumour. So I had surgery again, but this time I had a much bigger portion of my breast removed. And I remember just thinking, okay, that's it, I'm not going to breastfeed. I kind of just resigned myself to that, and again just carried on with my life. But obviously after we got married and we was thinking more about having children, I did want to breastfeed. So I thought, okay, let's see if it's possible to do it with one boob. So I went onto forums and I saw that there was loads of women successfully feeding just from one side. So I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna do it. And I was really optimistic about it. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna breastfeed. Every time I went to appointments, they was like, do you plan on breastfeeding? I was like, yeah, of course I'm gonna breastfeed. And really I should have thought a bit more about it. Like there's still a possibility that it might not work, but I was just so fixated on, yeah, it's possible, I can do it, it's the most natural thing in the world, it's just gonna happen just like that. But it didn't. So Atlas was born at 38 weeks via C-section, and he just did not latch. And at first I thought it could have just been down to the surgery, him being a little bit sleepy from the C-section. But later on I went on to find out that it was something else. So while we were in hospital, I was obviously trying my best to get him to feed, and it wasn't happening. And I remember one of the midwives coming in and saying, okay, you just need to give him formula now because it's clearly not working. And I was so shocked at just the way that she just threw that out there. I was already quite emotional enough as it is. I just, my birth hadn't gone to plan, and now breastfeeding, I just felt like everything was being taken away from me and I just wasn't in control. And I was obviously quite hormonal. I was really, really upset by what she had just said. But thankfully, Skinner had spoke to some of the staff there, and we managed to get a lactation lady come in and see me, because the thing was, he was born 2 weeks early, so we didn't even make it to our breastfeeding workshop. So I really did not know what was going on. So she came in and she showed us how to hand express the colostrum, and literally from that point, Skinner, my husband, just milked me like a cow. He was constantly just hand expressing into these tiny little tubes, and that's how we fed Atlas for the first few days of his life. So obviously I was really pleased that I didn't have to give him formula in hospital, and I was able to give him that colostrum. And then once we got home, I got on the pump straight away. I thought, okay, and all the time I was still trying to put him to the breast, trying to get him to feed, doing all the skin to skin, doing everything they tell you, but he just wasn't latching. So yeah, so I started pumping, and I expressed for him and fed him with a bottle. And then the midwife came along and she said, well, what have you done that for? Because now he's never going to take your boob. And I was just, again, I was really taken aback by just the way that I was being spoken to and the abruptness of it all. And to me, it was a really fragile, delicate situation, and they just wasn't handling it in the best way. So I just felt like nothing was good enough. It was still my milk, but she made me feel that I wasn't feeding him So yeah, that was really that was really horrible. And all of this, like, he was born around Christmas time, so all of the breastfeeding support groups were like closed for the holidays. But we did manage to get in to see a lady. They weren't open, but she did. They was just there doing some admin stuff that day. But she did let me go in and see her. And straight away she took one look and she was like, "You've got an inverted nipple." And I was like, "What? Why has nobody picked this up?" And she was like, "Yeah, try a nipple shield." And that was it. we went out, bought the nipple shields, and then he went on and he fed for the first time. And I remember feeling so emotional and elated and happy that I was like, this is it, we're on our way now. I don't need to pump anymore, which stupidly I should have carried on pumping, because that was obviously keeping my supply going. But in my head I was just, emotionally I was just so fixated on, no, I want to feed him myself. This was the one thing that I could do that nobody else could do. So I just wanted to do it, and I stopped pumping, which was a bit of a mistake looking back on it, but it is what it is. So yeah, I started feeding him, but the feeds were very short. And he was losing a lot of weight. So when the midwife came back to see us, he'd lost more than 10% of his body weight. And she said, look, you really need to consider to supplement with some formula. And again, I was just, I was heartbroken. I felt like I was clinging on so hard to make this work. And every time I just kept getting knocked down. So yeah, that was a really hard thing to accept, that okay, he did need some formula for him to get his weight up. And I remember giving him that formula. I don't think I could even do it that first time. I think Skinner did it, and I just cried and cried because I felt like I'd failed. I felt like I'd failed him. And I just kept saying, sorry, Mummy can't give you her milk. And it was devastating to me. It was really, really difficult. But actually, formula is what saved us. By giving him formula, we were actually able to feed for as long as we did. So we then went on to combination feed. So we did a bit of boob and a bit of bottle, and that worked brilliantly for us. I was able to obviously, have those little small moments of breastfeeding him, but also had that reassurance that, he is getting what he needs from the formula as well. He's gaining the weight and he's thriving. But it was still really difficult. I really struggled with that, and I didn't like feeding him in public, because I thought if somebody saw me feeding him formula, they'd like judge me and think I was a terrible mum. But equally, I also didn't like breastfeeding him in public, because with the nipple shield, it wasn't just a case of like just pulling up my top and just feeding him. It was like I had to stimulate my boob, and then I had to apply the shield, and then try and get him on without him whacking it off, which he always did. So it was difficult being out in public. I just avoided it. I just wanted to stay indoors all the time, which wasn't healthy, and it definitely it is what led me to have postnatal depression. I believe that was the root core of it all. But yeah, so I've kind of forgot where I was now. What was I saying? So combination feeding, yeah, that was something I didn't even know existed, because there's not really that much information out there about it. I feel like people want you to just exclusively breastfeed, which is great if you can, but if you can't, it's good to know that there are options and you can do both. And yeah, I had no idea that was a thing. So we did both, and that's what worked for us. Also, I felt like, with the nipple shields, there was a lot of like stigma around that as well. Like, I remember the midwife, I was so proud of myself. I was like, look, he's feeding. And she was like, yeah, you're going to need to wean him off that soon, like the nipple shield. And I was like, but I've only just got him on now. You want me to remove it? This is the only thing enabling him to feed. I just really couldn't understand it. It never felt good enough with that particular midwife. Thankfully, I got an amazing health visitor after that who was just like amazing. She was absolutely amazing. I'll talk more about her later, but yeah, I always thought a nipple shield was basically there for when you got like cracked nipples and stuff like that. I had no idea that it actually helps to keep the nipple in place. So if you don't know what inverted nipples means, it's just the nipple doesn't protrude out enough for the baby to get a good enough latch. So basically I had floppy flat boobs and that's why he couldn't get on. And as well, I only had one boob to feed with, so I was up against a lot, and really going into it I shouldn't have put as much pressure on myself as I did, but that's what happened. So as well, I also developed something, this was really horrible, called vasospasm, and this is, I think this was to do with the fact that we didn't have a very good latch, and it's to do with like blood supply being cut off. So whenever my, and it was also, it can be brought on by stress, and it was a very stressful time trying to breastfeed. It's because I so desperately wanted to do it, and it just wasn't happening, and I couldn't deal with that failure. It felt awful. But yeah, so with the vasospasm, whenever my nipple was exposed to cold air, it would get like this awful, like shooting nerve pain. Like it just felt like razor blades, just cutting like me to shreds. But it was only when it was with like cold air. So something that really helped me with that was I got these little like circular things that you put in your bra, but you put them in the microwave first, or you could put them in the freezer depending on like what the situation was, whether it was like swelling or whatever. So yeah, I'd have these little heat pads in my bra, and that really helped me. Some other things that helped me as well, I'll show you, is these were amazing. So these are Boob lactation cookies. They really helped with my supply a lot. Obviously I struggled with supply because we didn't get a good enough latch established for it to, you know, to be coming in fully. I also got some mother's milk tea, which my really good friend Lily sent me. And these were amazing, and these were really tasty. I loved drinking this, so that helped with lactation as well, and so did the there's little smoothie sachets. I'll try and link everything below. That really helped. Another thing, back when I was like obviously exclusively pumping for him, I had like this bra which was like hands-free, so I didn't have to like hold the pump. I could just like be like this and pump. Pumping was really difficult. I didn't like pumping, and I think it's just because I resented it, because I wanted to be able to feed him and, you know, not have to give him the bottle. But it was the only way initially to get my milk into him, so I'm thankful to it, but it wasn't easy, and it's really hard when you're sitting there for ages and like hardly anything's coming out. Yeah, so I don't have that to show you, by the way, because I couldn't get the smell of milk out of it, and I can't show you the heat pad either, because I gave that to a friend because she was struggling as well. So but I will, like I said, I'll link some things below. Another thing that I got told about, but I wish I didn't get told about this until after we finished breastfeeding. I wish I'd known about it. It was this little tiny like pump, so you'd put it on your nipple before feeding, and you just like squeeze it like that, kind of like, you know, when you're expressing a similar action, but it's like this little tiny handheld one. And I thought, you know, if I'd have known about that, that could have really, you know, helped us a lot, but I didn't know about it. I felt like the midwives weren't giving me these aids to help make it work. I felt like they only wanted him to just be directly on the skin, on the boob, and that just wasn't happening. So like I really feel like, you know, more support needs to be had when it comes to things like inverted nipples and stuff like that, and combination feeding, because, you know, it's, for some people this is the only way we can make it work. And it's not a bad thing at all, it really isn't. So yeah, I really felt like I was like, that particular midwife was really trying to push for me to stay away from all that stuff, when that was the only way I could feed him. So yeah, so we combination fed for 5 months. I would have loved to have kept going. I'd love to still be feeding him now, but it got to a point where he just started refusing it completely. We'd started him on solids, and he took to food instantly. He loved food, which was like a relief, because then I was like, okay, he's not so dependent on the milk anymore. But yeah, once that had happened, he started eating food. He just didn't want the boob anymore. Every time I tried to feed him, he'd scream and push me away, and that rejection was really, really hard. It was really difficult, because I felt like I'd clung on for so long to make it work, and I felt like we'd only just really, you know, got somewhere with it, and then all of a sudden it was over. He just didn't want it anymore. And I was speaking to my health visitor, the really lovely one, who was just, she was so great. She got lots of support put in place for me when I was in a really bad place, because, you know, I got quite bad postnatal depression about it all, and she hooked me up with counselling and group therapy, and yeah, she was amazing. And she was the one who said to me, he needs you more than he needs your milk. And it really put it into perspective for me. And it's like, I had lost sight. I'd become so obsessed and fixated with breastfeeding that I wasn't me. I wasn't looking after myself. I wasn't being the best mother for Atlas, because all I wanted to do was to feed him and to prove that I could do it. And yeah, it really took me down a really dangerous path. Mentally, I just wasn't well. And then when she'd said that to me, it really clicked. And it's like, you know, he needs me, and he was happy enough with the formula. So I really had to let go of what I wanted and to kind of honour what he wanted and respect his decision to stop. So so yeah, it's been a year since we've stopped. It was really difficult to come to terms with. Even now, I'll see like people breastfeeding or pictures on Instagram, and like I'm happy for them. I think it's amazing. I love breastfeeding, but there's a little bit of me that's like, oh, I wish I could be doing that. But I have to remind myself, and I have to look at Atlas, and I look at him and think, all that he is now is because of me and not because of my milk. You know, so it's a credit to me as a mother. Like, there is so much more to motherhood than milk. You know, once you stop feeding, it's not like that's it, it's over. Like like the milk doesn't reflect us as mothers. So whether you breastfeed, bottle feed, no matter how you feed your baby, you are an amazing mum, and I really want you to remember that. And hopefully that's something you can take away from this video, and know that you're not alone. If you're struggling, you are not alone. It's so hard, and it's devastating when it doesn't work out the way you want it to. You know, I hear you. I know exactly what you're going through. I'd love for you to leave some comments below about your experience, whether you breastfed or bottle fed, and if you've got any questions for me about combination feeding or about inverted nipples or vasospasm, anything like that, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions below. One last thing before I go is something that really helped me to have closure, I'd say, was this necklace that I had made. So Skinner got this for me, and that in there is actually my breast milk. So we had my milk sent off to this company and made into this little keepsake necklace, so that I could keep it forever and I could always remember that moment in our lives. And yeah, even though it wasn't what I had thought it would be, it was what was meant for us and our journey. And you know, I've learned a lot from it, and I've grown a lot from it. So yeah, I'll try and link this below. I definitely recommend trying to get your milk saved for life, because it's just a really nice token, I think. And the little crystal on the end is amethyst, which is great for things like anxiety and depression. So it helps keep me really calm and stuff like that. So yes, thank you so much for watching. Again, please let's have some conversations below. I'd love to hear your story. And yeah, thanks again for watching. I've said that a million times now. I'm terrible at ending videos. Right, I'm going. Thank you for watching. Mwah.